Hello and welcome to the Droid and Dragon Cantina, a podcast highlighting independent science fiction and fantasy authors. Our guest this week is Eric Malikyte, an author, illustrator, science communicator, and video editor who has written the OEI Files, the Sulinar's Enigma books, The Mind's Horizon, Cthulu Grimoire, Echoes of Olympus Mons, and more. In this episode, we talked about the art of writing cosmic horror and storytelling in science fiction in general. Well, welcome to the show, Mr. Eric Malikyte.
Well, thanks for having me.
So right up at the top, let's tell people about some of the books you've got out there.
Well, I've got 5 out currently that are full books. They're in 3 different genres, which can seem a little confusing. But when you realize I have ADHD, you'll be like, okay, no, that checks. But right now I'm focusing on the OEI series, which is it started out as an analog horror experiment on YouTube. And then I was like, you know what? The first book I wrote, Mind's Horizon, kind of fits into that because that's where Dr. Weber came from and everything. So I decided, you know what, from now on, I'm going to be focusing on stories that are both epistolary, but still in the cosmic horror vein that I've been doing a lot. So I started out with Mind's Horizon, branched out, and I'm doing OEI stories for the Books of Cthulhu series for Crossroad Press. But now we are releasing the short stories that were paywalled behind Books of Cthulhu, so Tales of Nyarlathotep, Book of Hastur, right now, into the OEI Files series. So all of that's free and a great place to jump on if you're a big fan of Lovecraft, cosmic horror, and whatnot. So In Its Shadow is currently free on Amazon, and everything else is going to be super affordable and everything going forward. And we're going to do freebies and stuff like that. And then in September, Cthulu Grimoire comes out. That's my next book. It's OEI book 2, and it's a detective noir / liminal nightmare. It is probably the weirdest damn thing I've ever written. And if you're a big fan of weird fiction the way I am, you're going to be eating good. At least I hope.
So for the uninitiated, what does the OEI stand for?
Office of Extra Dimensional Intelligence. And here's the concept behind it. So you've heard of the many worlds theory, right?
Yes.
And there's a lot of multiverse stuff in pop culture right now, and a lot of people are sick of it. But I thought it would be funny if we had yeah, you know what I mean. Like, no one wants to hear the word multiverse, but trust me, this is a pretty good concept right here. So imagine you had this government organization in most realities, and it is like Black Ops or something, or it's just completely off the books, or it gets increasingly more corrupt as it goes along, as people dive into the Cthulhu mythos or into the strange things into the dreamlands, and it drives them crazy, right? So there's always a guy called Dr. Weber, and every Earth thinks that they are Earth variant 001 based on their naming convention. So every story is different. It's an anthology, but there is a Dr. Weber in every single Earth variant, and it's funny. So what they do as a organization is they scan for rogue radio signals, TV signals, and other things to find evidence of other Earth variants that have gone through cataclysmic events. So the analog horror stuff was focused on, okay, we're going to have a broadcast, and then an asteroid is going to hit the planet, and it's going to create like a color out of space scenario, but it's going to be like a fungal organism that infests the human population and gets control of the emergency broadcast system and starts telling people to go outside and breathe the air. Something creepy like that, a little bit creepypasta, but well written and whatnot. So
yeah. So did you get the writing bug when you were really young, or was it something that happened later in life?
Oh, I was absolutely like a child with ADHD. I loved media right from the beginning, and I've been telling stories or drawing or what have you since I was a little kid. So storytelling is kind of, it is a fundamental part of me. But I didn't write my first book until 2011 or something like that. And yeah, it was basically like Mass Effect that's it. It was Cyberpunk Mass Effect, which is already kind of Mass Effect. And no one's ever going to see that manuscript at all. But I grew up on films like Alien and Predator and The Thing, and I really latched on to the Lovecraftian aspects of The Thing and Alien. So like, if you don't know anything about me, I'm a huge Alien nerd. I basically put out 2-hour-long essays about the Alien series that did really well on YouTube. And I'm a huge fan of just the aesthetics of the space jockey scene in Alien. That is my favorite part of the entire film because it oozes at the Mountains of Madness, which is my favorite H.P. Lovecraft story. Basically, anything like that is weird fiction, deals with ancient, impossible alien temples and stuff like that. My brain eats that shit up.
So obviously Lovecraft is a big influence. At what point did you get into him?
Not right away. His influence on me was more through like H.R. Giger's artwork and like the indirect influence on movies and whatnot like that. So I didn't actually start reading Lovecraft and read through his entire catalog until like, I don't know, 2015, 2016, around there. And that was right about when I was getting ready to launch my own stuff. And it really allowed me to click allowed some stuff in my brain to click, like, what is this cosmic horror thing? Why do I like this stuff so much? And a lot of people talk about Lovecraft's racism and stuff like that. You can't get around it. If you're writing cosmic horror, you kind of have to deal with it. At some point, someone's going to ask you about it, right?
Yeah, I always say with Lovecraft, he had good ideas about monsters and bad ideas about people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And while his specific fear, his racism does tie into it, but for me, what cosmic horror is and what draws me to cosmic horror is the idea that we are not the center of the universe. We would like to be, but we are this tiny, infinitesimally small speck in the universe, and it unnerves us when we think about the vastness of our universe, how impossibly big it is. It is the existential dread that you feel when you comprehend how impossibly large even a planet like Jupiter is. My wife, for example, if I talk about anything regarding space, like a couple sentences in, and she'll stop me because it starts to creep her out. That is the feeling that I go for with my cosmic horror. It doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have to lean into, the giant gods and like Cthulhu and whatnot. What I want is to be able to instill a sense of existential dread that your reality could come undone, essentially, at some point through some liminal process. And I talk about liminality in my video essays and stuff a lot because it's something that we've been seeing creep up in indie film quite a bit, and I believe in indie writing as well, especially when you're working in weird fiction.
Yeah, it's my God, Lovecraft has been around for a while, and then his influence has been just kind of creeping into the culture through various writers and artists for decades, almost coming up almost on a century now. He's
he wrote some good stuff. Like you can talk crap about his writing style or his capabilities as a writer, but he was good at setting a mood and following through. And sometimes, like, reading The Haunter of the Dark, which is one of my other favorites of his, and by the way, In Its Shadow, the short story that I'm offering for free, is a sequel to The Haunter of the Dark, which is kind of funny. And it takes place in the 80s, and you find out what the Church of Starry Wisdom is up to, which is one of the more underrated cults in the Cthulhu mythos. But you feel like you're going a little crazy when you're reading his stuff, because it's very manic, and that's something that's a little missing from some modern Lovecraftian works.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I've watched
a few things that were supposed to be Lovecraftian, right? Because that's they'll hook you with that angle, but you kind of see places that doesn't quite, it never quite captures that thing that Lovecraft was good at. Just like you're talking about, just kind of like unmooring your reality, and that it's easy to say that and talk about it, but to actually do it with writing, like that really does require a certain skill.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really difficult to pull off. And so one of the things that's really funny and consistent with my work when working with my editor is she will tell me that she doesn't like editing my books at night. So there's another thing, though. I'm working on a sequel to my, I guess you would call it a Cthulhu punk novel. Echoes of Olympus Mons was my debut, and it was cosmic horror but set on Mars, and a lot of people dig that. It doesn't sell as well as some of my other stuff, but I'm writing a sequel, and the concept is basically it's color out of space but in interstellar space, and this crew wakes up on the first interstellar voyage ever done, in humanity's history, and their ship is just infested with things, creatures like the Thing, basically, and they have to figure out why. And there is a scene that I wrote where someone is experiencing age suppression sleep, where they are put into a coma while the ship is accelerating to like 20% of C, which is 20% of the speed of light. And they have this nightmare, and it's about the vastness of the universe. And I sent it to a couple friends because it's still in drafting stage. And he told me it gave him existential dread.
Yeah, that's the kind of compliment you're looking for right there. I recently watched a video about, I watched a video about just black holes. And when the lady who was hosting the video just kind of keeps pulling back. Okay, well, you think that's big. Well, there's another one that's this big. If you think that's big, there's another one that's this big. And it just goes and goes and goes. And you're just like, that's one of those things that you just go, dear God, like it's like just when you think you've got a grasp on it, like a remote, like a tiny, tiny little, finger hold, you learn a little more. And then you're just like, oh.
Not just that, but think about black holes, and specifically, let's talk about one of the largest black holes that we've ever found, which is M87, I believe. That's the first supermassive black hole that the Event Horizon Telescope team took an image of. And it's for those of you who don't know, the Event Horizon Telescope is a basically planetary-sized radio telescope. It's a network, and they point this radio telescope network that is the size of the planet at a supermassive black hole and detect all the radiation and radio emissions coming from it. And that's how they make the picture. If you were to stand on the surface of that black hole, every, I think, hour that you spend there is like 700 years here because of time dilation, because the gravity well is just that insane. Think about that. An hour there is 700 here. Just wrap your mind around the way that time dilation works. And it's a little like
the famous scene from Interstellar. Like that was one of the first movies that really got into it. And then the thing that I learned that they did, like, in the background, the little tick, and like you hear it in the music and the score. And apparently like they're saying that's like every tick is like a day going by on Earth. And of course, like they're down there for what? Excuse me. They're down there for what, like 3 hours, and it comes back and it's like been like 21 years on Earth or something like that. I don't know. I might be fudging the math a little bit, but
it's something like, because like gravitational wells and time dilation kind of works like a gradient. The closer, if you were standing on the surface of a black hole, that's where you get the most extreme time dilation effects. But if you're on a planet that's orbiting the black hole, it's not going to be as bad. I'm a science nerd, if you can't tell.
I was going to say, like how deep did you dive into the whole astronomy aspect? Like, are you reading books, or is that something you studied in school? Like, how did that factor in?
I did a little bit of science communication. I dabbled a little bit. I had a channel called Science Get for a while, and it was small, about 5,000 subscribers or something before I got too burnt out to do it. But yeah, I was planning on like putting up amateur astronomer stuff. I have a Newtonian telescope. I often point it to Jupiter because it's the easiest thing to see with a Newtonian telescope. But yeah, I know quite a bit about space travel, astronomy, and whatnot, and it informs my work quite a bit, even on street level cosmic horror, as I'm gonna call it. Cthulhu Grimoire is kind of weird because it involves a for-profit art school where several students have committed suicide, and someone is a black kid named Dean is being framed for the murder, basically. And the main character, Hunter, has to find a way to prove his innocence, but he finds out that they've all been influenced by this computer virus. It's like the Necronomicon on steroids, but the
digital version or the Kindle version.
It's a little more insidious than that, though, because so when I was going to art school, way back when, we had this virus, and it was it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, all it did was force your home screen to come up, or not even a home screen, but a root menu to come up, basically. And that's all it did. But if you plugged your flash drive into any tower that was infected, you would get this virus, and it would just pop up in a folder. Like, okay, who would write a virus like that? Probably some asshole, right? But it spread to the whole network, and you couldn't not have this virus. So that gave me the idea that, like, what if the Necronomicon was like that, where you plug a flash drive in, it automatically pops up on your screen, and you're like hypnotized as it drills holes in your brain, basically. And that's the premise. It is a virus that is spreading through first the artist, because one of the coolest things about Cthulhu is his effect on artists, like the strange dreams they have, how they're compelled to make art. Like, that's one of the things that drew me to writing more OEI stories, was all of the subjects that Dr. Weber tortures with these horrific, non-human intelligences, as he would call them. They all feel the compulsion to either write down what they're experiencing or illustrate them, which is why the series has a large focus on art.
Yeah, it's one of the things I've always been kind of surprised that no one's ever tried to do, like some kind of TV series or something in the vein of that kind of Lovecraftian, or even just kind of taking the idea of the Call of Cthulhu, because it's one of those things. There's a quality to it that almost feels like open-ended, that you could just keep running with it in different directions. And I think that's one of the things about Lovecraft, is that he actually encouraged other people to come and play in that sandbox that he created, which is why you get so many crazy variations, and obviously some are better than others. But it also, like you were saying, it almost encourages this kind of like visual angle that I'm surprised no filmmaker has really kind of tried to jump on and really kind of run with it and just push it. You've seen a few films out there that have kind of come close to getting it.
Oh yeah.
But I feel like nobody that I've seen yet has really just dove into it. You've heard of people because every once in a while you'll hear like there'll be like a Call of Cthulhu game come out there, or like you hear someone talking about doing like in the Mountains of Madness, that film that's one minute was on, 1 minute it was no one.
I'm so mad about that.
It's like in development.
Guillermo del Toro would have done a great job with that. I'm still so angry, and it's all because Prometheus failed at the box office, or critically too.
Yeah, the Ridley Scott Aliens thing. But the problem with that one was that I feel like if you've watched more than like 2 or 3 episodes of Ancient Aliens, you knew right where that movie was going from the jump.
And that's like, I don't know why, but look, I could talk. Obviously, I did talk for an entire hour about this subject, but Prometheus is basically hyperdiffusionism, and you have these aliens that are just tall white people. It's pretty on the nose. If you don't know what hyperdiffusionism is in archaeology, it's when pseudo archaeologists come in and say, oh well, we're ancient people couldn't have stacked blocks a certain way, so obviously aliens did it, right? Or a master race, and it's kind of uncomfortable there. That is entirely I mean, Prometheus has many other problems, trust me, but that is a major problem with it. Yeah.
That ironically, I thought the thing that would have made it more interesting was something that they cut out. The whole, if you've heard of it, apparently there was in the original storyline, from what I've heard and read, is that they were going to say that, the reason that they're trying to kill humans now is that they had brought one of them up there to train, to let him live amongst them and train him. And when they sent him back, they killed him. And that was supposed to be Jesus. So I'm sure nobody wanted that smoke, I guess, to deal with if they put that out in the movie theaters. But to me, that was like, okay, at least now you've kind of
that's saying something,
right? You've made a statement. Not just kind of being vague.
I'm not necessarily down with Space Jesus, but that's at least saying something. But you can still see a lot of that stuff and its influence on the film. But Dan O'Bannon, when he was working on the original Alien, and Ridley Scott and H.R. Giger too, like Lovecraft's ancient aliens are not like the ancient aliens of the TV show, or Eric von Daniken's Ancient Aliens.
Not the Chariots of the Gods, Graham Hancock stuff. Exactly.
They are, we're an accident. That's probably the coolest thing about it. We are an accident, a breeding mistake or something, or our ancestors were an accident. To them, they created this race called the Shoggoth, and I am staunchly pro Shoggoth. Shoggoth are awesome, and see, a lot of people talk about the Elder Things, like, oh, the Elder Things. The Shoggoth, though, were slaves. And Lovecraft, and believe me, I love At the Mountains of Madness, but Lovecraft was like, oh, look at how poor Elder Things, their slaves revolted and killed them. How dare those monsters do this, and my buddy Charles and I, CT Phipps, and I talk about this a lot, and we joke around about, like, come on, Lovecraft, that's being a little on the nose, right? But the Shoggoth are so cool, and there's so few stories that like delve into them and explore them. Like Charles does it a little bit in his Cthulhu Armageddon series, but I'm hoping to really flesh that out with the connection between both humanity and the Shoggoth and Cthulhu Grimoire, because I think there's some really interesting things that you can do with them.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be on the side of the slaves that free themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're the size of a train. They're an amorphous amoeba style blob with glowing eyes and stuff. That's just cool. They can become anything or anyone.
Yeah, anytime you start bringing in shapeshifters, that's always room for some good shenanigans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it lets you do some more really interesting body horror things, but especially with the connection between humanity, the Shoggoth, and the whole angle where Cthulhu can kind of control your mind, and there's a whole other aspect that involves AI and the OEI and their experiments and whatnot that you guys are just going to have to wait to see. But it's it's pretty gross.
There is something I'm thinking about, Cthulhu, dealing with an AI mind that could go in some pretty interesting directions.
And that's basically, there is that aspect. I will say that right now, and it's weird because the way I wrote Cthulhu Grimoire, you kind of have to read close and kind of watch out for certain turns of phrase, and when certain characters don't speak in a way that feels like who they are or who you think they are. What does their voice sound like? That's at least if I did my job right, it'll stand out.
Nice. Well, so you've already mentioned we got Lovecraft and the Aliens movies. What are some of your other what are some of the other things that kind of have influenced your style?
Well, I mean, you can see the Goku statue back there, so I'm a huge Dragon Ball fan. I like comics, I grew up on Batman, Superman, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was an absolute obsession and continues to be one to this day. But like, I like a lot of different IPs. I enjoy dark fantasy. I've got a bunch of Neil Gaiman books right there, and that's a little. I don't know how I feel about
Not
that
as
lately.
much fun to talk about him as it used to be.
I know, right? And that's given me pause, but I ate his stuff up. Roger Zelazny is an author that I don't feel like I have to worry about mentioning his name, right? Roger Zelazny was a great guy. The Chronicles of Amber stuff was a huge influence too, and that's where a lot of my influences as far as dark fantasy come from. But I've got China Mayville up there, Douglas Adams, all sorts of stuff. Like, I'm into a lot of different varied things. Like, I don't just pick one interest and go there. Like, I'm a huge Mega Man fan too. Like, I am a glutton for punishing platformers, and so like. I played the hell out of the Mega Man X games and the Mega Man Zero games and S ranked pretty much everything. Mega Man specifically, the X series, I challenged myself to beat every single one of them without any armor upgrades or anything. So I am a gamer, a retro gamer more nowadays, but I like Dark Souls and stuff like that, especially Bloodborne. Bloodborne is a fantastic Lovecraftian story.
Yeah, well, it's I've mentioned it a few times with talking with other authors. Nowadays, like video games have become like a big source of inspiration for people too, and like another venue for storytelling. My God, you can go on and just go pick a game and then just go like watch all the cut together cinema scenes, and some of it's as good as any as a lot of shows or movies out there.
Yeah, some of it's a legit art form, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful form of expression. And what's interesting about analog horror is they started as ARGs, which is an augmented reality game, right? So people would get into these universes like Local 58 or Gemini Home Entertainment, which is one of my favorite ones. That's a very Lovecraftian one. So if you want to get into analog horror, go there. And basically they were getting the community involved with this mystery. They were posting, bits of clues and stuff that people could link together and whatnot. And games are a big part of that. The games help us stay involved and whatnot. That's why Call of Cthulhu, I think, as a tabletop RPG is so popular. Delta Green too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just it's really cool. Like, I guess it's like an embarrassment of riches that nowadays there's just so many avenues for storytelling. Mm-hmm. And even you get like audio drama, too, like audio books. Like, I mean, I've heard some of the stuff I've heard are things I've even been involved with. Like, a guy I know does one that's, I don't know if you call it Lovecraftian, but there's probably some elements of it in there. It's called Mandible Judy. A guy named Chris Burke does it. That's also kind of like in the realm of kind of like that 80s Stephen King style sci-fi.
Yeah. And Stephen King was hugely influenced by Lovecraft.
Oh yeah. And then, nowadays you have like a bunch of I'm sure he's got a bunch of disciples of his own, kind of putting his own stamp on it. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to that's definitely something like someday I'd love to do, is just kind of do like a trace. I could do a whole series just about tracing the history of like sci-fi and fantasy, more so the sci-fi aspect. But I mean, I feel like there's always fantasy always kind of creeps in there at some point.
Well, it's all speculative fiction, and there's a reason why most magazines out there, one of the oldest being the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, it's all lumped under the same umbrella for a reason. It's still speculative fiction, and science fiction, even though it aims to be scientifically accurate, is still a fantasy. So I think the division between the two genres is a lot more tenuous than a lot of people seem to think.
Yeah, it's someone said like they're next door neighbors and they borrow each other's sugar.
Right. What's interesting is I saw a review on a website of Echoes of Olympus Mons, which I mentioned does take place on Mars, has a lot of the science fiction elements, and works its cosmic horror through the use of dark matter and a dark matter camera. And someone's like, can paranormal and sci-fi coexist? I don't think so. And I'm like, have you heard of Lovecraft? That's basically what he was doing.
Was that the Paranormal Activity? They're filming all that stuff, and it's supposed to be like found footage. So you're taking like a scientific angle towards a fantastical, premise. So and that's a pretty big one.
Look, found footage horror is great. It's like I watched one called Banshee Chapter, which is a loose adaptation of From Beyond by H.P. Lovecraft, and it has like a Hunter S. Thompson / Charles Bukowski type character in it. He's just a scoundrel, but he's a brilliant writer, and it's a found footage film. It does the District 9 thing where it fades into a normal narrative and you don't realize it. So maybe don't watch it drunk. But it was a great example. Like, I recommend renting it. It was like, found footage gets a lot of hate by horror fans, I guess, for being cheesy, but the good ones are really good.
Yeah, and look, if you can pull it off properly, it's very effective.
Oh yeah. And so in literature, what is our found footage? It's epistolary tales like Dracula, the original Dracula by Bram Stoker. It's Lovecraft's stories. All of them are epistolary. They're all autobiographical. Now, there's a lot you can do with that as far as like, what kind of characters are you focusing on? Who are the viewpoints, right? What makes them interesting? And for me, what makes them interesting is usually they deserve what's coming to them. Usually, not always. Sometimes it's a little more interesting to see someone who doesn't, quite deserve to go insane too. There is that, but that's an interesting angle to explore. The villains almost always are some asshole human who got a hold of the Necronomicon, and my cat snoring. I hope that didn't come through. And then exploited it,
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for watching just someone, who really deserves it get their comeuppance.
We just watched the season finale of You last night, and that is exactly what happened.
Well, I think there's two, like a guy I know coined the term for like nowadays you have this genre where the guy called it like last asshole standing, where like you really don't have, like, there's not too many likable characters, but I think like at a certain point you're just watching to see them all get it in some way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Mind's Horizon was a lot like that, because it was a weird millennial style found, or not even found family, because they're forced to live together. All the characters in that are people that probably shouldn't have survived, but circumstances have put them together. And the whole story behind that novel is it's a snowball Earth scenario. So the whole Earth is freezing over. It's not a normal ice age. They're stuck in California and everything's covered in ice, and they're the only ones who have survived, and they're at each other's throats. Now, my inspiration behind that was The Thing, the way that all of the characters kind of suspect each other and whatnot, and to take a different angle on that. But there are also like 3 cosmic entities in that, so it's a little stuffed. But I think I've refined that approach to give you a little bit of a balance between likable characters and insufferable assholes too.
It's good.
A nice gradient. Right. I don't think most of the characters in Mind's Horizon are complete assholes. I think anyone can latch on to, say, Ira or one of the main characters, or Eddie, or what have you.
Or you get like a character who's just like a lovable asshole. There's certainly those in there. Like, they're not good people, but you kind of like them because maybe they are protecting. You've got a bad person who's protecting the good person. They're just good enough to realize, like, okay, maybe I should look after this person over here.
Yeah. But I think people are going to be really surprised, especially people who read Mind's Horizon with Cthulhu Grimoire, because it is. Oh, I think it is the weirdest damn thing I've ever written.
So speaking of which, tell everybody where they can find your stuff online, or if you find you on social media if they want to, at you or talk about this stuff. Or
Eric Malikyte on Blue Sky, Facebook. I'm on YouTube as Story Rant. You can find me. You can find the original OEI series, the analog horror stuff, by searching Office of Extra-Dimensional Intelligence. And you can grab In Its Shadow free right now on Amazon and every other like Smashwords, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, Google Books, everywhere, and it's free right now. The Stranger is also offered on my mailing list as a freebie redemption, and that one involves the King in Yellow. So if you like the King in Yellow, you're going to want that. So Cthulhu Grimoire will be coming out in September, and you can find Mind's Horizon pretty much everywhere right now as well. And there's an audiobook. It's actually one of the few things of mine that has an audiobook right now, but I'm working on fixing that.
Outstanding. Well, thanks for coming out, man, and we'll be on the lookout for your stuff.
Hell yeah.
That will be all for this episode. This podcast has been a Carcutta Media production. To learn more about this show or other podcasts, visit carcuttamedia.com/podcasts or follow us on social media at Carcutta Media. This recording or any portion thereof may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for use of brief quotations in a review. Copyright 2025 by Carcutta Media. All rights reserved.